Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get started here in just a moment. Let's get the thread posted here. Welcome to the Disqualification Show. Welcome back after a little bit of a week off here for the Easter holiday. Hope you had a great spring break. But there's a Talladega race in the books, and thankfully a very different show from what we had last fall. So let's put this up here, and we'll get started here. Oop. Good to see everybody. First of all, out of the care center after the accident there on the final lap. Let's go take a look at the action here. Glad to be back, everyone. Welcome. I see 4 people in the chat here. Thank you for joining in. We'll keep everything as it should be here. Yeah, very big difference from last fall's race. I got to say, I'm pretty happy with this aero package. He actually had a nice mix of unpredictability, but also with some of these other, basically some of the big names or the big teams that you typically see up there would actually still be able to get back up there. It was nice to see Keselowski, for example, having a really good run during that, and even after the spin on pit road and the caution getting him back into it, very much almost became a factor in the race there, and it didn't quite work out. But it'll be interesting to see going from there. But definitely the best cars in the field seem to be, Chase Elliott, of course, with the victory right now. We're, of course, waiting for the results from technical inspection. But Ford's putting on a show, especially Logano in particular, and Arc Almirola seem to have about the second best car out there. And unfortunately, neither of them could quite find their way to victory lane. But congratulations to Chase Elliott, pending the results from inspection, as we are now about just past the 15-minute mark in the wait for the inspection results. So let's take a look at the back of the field, though, first of all. So an unfortunate turn of events for Michael McDowell once again. This is now his 3rd last place finish of the year. And as reported by another poster online, this is now his 33rd last place finish in the Cup Series, which now ties him with Joe Nemechek for the most in series history, of course, pending the disqualification results. As you saw in the infographic that we posted earlier this week, McDowell actually took the record last fall for the most laps complete of a Talladega last place finisher, but he had mechanical issues, had to spend several laps in the garage area, came back out and finished as best he could, but with so little attrition in the event, still ended up finishing in the last spot. This time around, very different story. An accident only 11 laps into the race, started by Bubba Wallace, bumping into his teammate, or his friend, Ryan Blaney. Something may or may not have happened with the bumper alignments. There seemed to be some confusion on that from the broadcast. Car gets crossed up. McDowell gets pinned in the outside wall. Fortunately, he's okay, but unfortunately, 34 had to get towed to the garage area along with Bubba Wallace, and that was the end of the day for him. Bubba still ranked 39th in the finishing results. Kevin Harvick, 38th. He was actually briefly last on the results page here at the moment when the accident occurred, but was able to complete another lap before the car stalled and had to get towed back. Harvick came out and ended up finishing in the 38th spot. An interesting technical analysis ended up filling out the bottom 5 with Matt Tifft in the 37th spot. A big piece of debris from underneath the nose of the car of the 34 car came out and embedded itself in the 36. So bad that they could even hardly cut the thing out of there. Big pan sticking out of the nose of the car there. And finally, we had a little trouble in the Fox broadcast actually showing the replay of what had happened. When they finally posted it, it showed that very large rectangular piece of material there embedded in the nose of the car. I'm sure it did some damage to the radiator and eliminated him from the race. Briefly there for a while, you had some other exchanges for the 36th spot before Denny Hamlin ultimately took it. Hamlin collected that accident damage to the right front of the FedEx Toyota. So no 2 straight plate wins for Hamlin as he rounds out the bottom 5. Again, unofficially, those are your drivers in the Cup Series race at the moment. So, but definitely looking at everybody's thoughts on the race here. Been interesting to talk about. It seems like everybody's pretty positive about what happened in the race there. And again, I'd have to agree. It definitely was something very entertaining. Just thinking back to the last fall's race and just it's not to say that we didn't have what we had last fall, where you had different manufacturers kind of trying to create their own drafting packs and pull away. But with a new combination of just everything being changed out in the aero package, they could do that, but not completely pull away and run by themselves. And it was especially if you got moved to the outside lane, it seemed like that really wasn't working. So very different set of circumstances there. But yeah, looking over everything else here. Yeah, scary accident for Kyle Larson there at the end of the race, and also a scary accident for what happened with the tangle there between Chris Buescher and Matt DiBenedetto going down the back straightaway. It really showed to me like just the difference in speed with the horsepower change running the tapered spacer and everything. The 95 seemed to just jump to the outside lane just before that accident happened, and there was absolutely no time to react. Collected him in there, and Justin Haley collected in that accident as well. But you have some different circumstances back there. But it's good to see Matt DiBenedetto have a good run in this race, as we saw from him in the Daytona 500 when we last talked about him back in February. Of course, leading all those laps in the race and actually catching up to the tail end of the field. And you had really the class of the field, at least for the first half to 2/3 of that race before he was eliminated in that accident at the end. DiBenedetto not as dominant in this one here. The unofficial results show him just leading just one lap. But the 95 stayed out there and actually had a good showing and was right up there, and unfortunately up there at the wrong time when Chris Buescher got turned on the back straightaway. Ended up collecting him. Justin Haley, who also had a fantastic run out there. We chronicled what was happening with him during the race on the Twitter feed here. Haley having a great run, for most of this race here. The 77 team, the Spire Motorsports team, we haven't seen a whole lot out of them. It seems like they're fielding cars out of the Jay Robinson's Premium Motorsports effort. But as we saw with Ross Chastain in the Daytona 500, they still have some good plate cars, or ability to mix it up and at least stay on the lead lap to be a factor in the races here. Chastain, of course, leading at the end of the race when he was off sequence. So good to see a good run out of both of them. But Haley had actually just lost a lap here at the end of this race before he was collected in that accident. But he was keeping up with the tail end of the field well enough that had the accident not involved him, he probably would have been in a good position to, if not get the lucky dog, be at least one step closer to it. But a great run for the 77, and good to see for both driver and team out there. Certainly for your first Cup start, I think that was a very good showing and much better than the 32nd place finish that shows for the 77 in the results. We typically seen that Spire Motorsports car competing for a lot of these last place finishes this year, both with Garrett Smithley and Quinn Huff and some of these other guys here. You go to these other tracks, these downforce tracks, and the disparity between the haves and have-nots gets a lot bigger. But a very different set of circumstances here. Looking at the comment, prayers for Jeffrey Earnhardt. Did they say? I thought everybody when that accident was cleared and released. Did they say that he's getting checked out? I have not seen anything on here at the moment. Like here, hopefully he's okay. I know he had a hard hit there with the 42 on the back straightaway. Not getting other reports on that. Let me look up here. Wish they would tell us something about Jeffrey Earnhardt. Okay, it looks like we don't have any confirmation on that. I didn't listen to, let's see. That's from the Xfinity race here. Looking at other tweets here on this. I mean, unfortunate set of circumstances. Again, certainly waiting to see what any other news on that. Definitely go ahead and post a comment in the chat if you're hearing anything else on that. Okay, he was released. Okay, good. Excellent. So, just make sure there's nothing else here on that. I didn't see anything on the Twitter feed here. But, okay. So, it's sounding like, yeah. These were older posts from about 20 minutes ago, so it's possible that it was just up in the air earlier during the broadcast. But yeah, I believe I had heard that everybody was checked and released, so that's good. Okay, good to know. Certainly, we're not seeing as many new teams coming into the sport there, but Jeffrey, good to see him back out there, as well as driving the 81, the XCI racing team, even though it's basically another Gibbs car, very similar to with the arrangement with the 95 team and the Toyota equipment. We didn't see didn't see him up there as much in the field there, but it seemed like he had a trouble staying on the lead lap. But then towards the end of the race, there getting back into the top 20. Good to see a good showing for him. But unfortunately, getting collected in that accident at the end of the race there, and unofficially showing Jeffrey Earnhardt in the was it the 14th spot? I believe it was further back than that. Where on earth did he go? 96, 22nd position shows here. But again, unofficial results, still waiting for the final results here from everything. Let's see. Yeah, that's insane. Just again, catching other replays of that accident with Larson there at the end. Very strange circumstance there. Even though with the roof flaps coming up, still getting some air underneath the car that caused the 42 to flip down the back straightaway. Getting a little organized here again on the show, trying to find my rhythm here again after the off weekend there. It feels like it's been longer than a week since our Richmond show. But definitely more than enough to talk about in this race. Let's talk about some of the good runs here in the meantime. You saw during the interviews there, Ryan Preece fulfilling the promise that he showed in the Daytona 500 when he was missing all those accidents, end up missing the accidents from today, including the one that collected his teammate Chris Buescher. Preece finishing in the third spot there behind Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman. So great run for the 47. Daniel Hemrick, the other rookie contender, getting in the top 5. Just one spot short of the dominant Joey Logano machine. Then you look further back, Brendan Gaughan, another good run for him in the 8th spot. The Beard Motorsports team, we didn't get to see them as much at the Daytona 500. It seemed like they were just a little bit off in that one. But here at Talladega, they managed to just be in the right place at the right time and get a top 10 finish for both driver and team. That's a fantastic showing for them. They were actually at the back of the field there from the start. Understood that they said from the beginning of the race that they had to do a driver change and have, I believe they said it was Tyler Reddick that was qualifying the 62 because his child had his first communion. So Gaughan came back out, climbed back in the number 62 car, and had a good finish today. So fantastic for him. If memory serves, this is also the site of where Gaughan had his best Cup Series finish way back in 2004, driving for Doug Bowell. I believe he had a top 5 back then. Let me confirm that on here. But certainly no stranger to Talladega Super Speedway is gone. And yes, his only top 5 was, the fall of 2004, finishing in the 4th spot in that race, race won by Dale Jr. And actually led 7 laps in that race too. So a good run for him back then. But a top 10 run for Gaughan today in his race. That'll be the 6th top 10 finish of his career and the first since the July Daytona race 2 years ago. When the Beard Motorsports team ran the number 75 instead of the 62. So good to see him work his way through the results there again. Unofficial, pending everything else here. Corey LaJoie just barely missed out on a top 10. A good bounce back for him after all the engine problems that he had with TriStar Motorsports last year. And, running a good 11th spot there at the finish in this one. Looking a bit further back, Ty Dillon has continued to turn around his season this year. The stage win that he collected at Bristol a couple weeks ago, followed up with another stage victory today in the race. Good for him. Reed Sorensen getting into the top 20 in the Premium Motorsports car, completely unsponsored, number 27. I'm not sure what expectations they had for that car today. Of course, Premium was primary number 15 with Ross Chastain, and then the help they have with the Spire Motorsports effort. For being perhaps a third string car in that effort, a good 18th place run, finishing ahead of people like Eric Jones and ahead of people like Martin Truex that were collected in accidents. So a good finish for them. 27 car getting a good finish out there. My computer is running very warm here, and I'm just going to make sure that it doesn't start shooting water here pretty soon. Okay. Looking further back, I was a little surprised not to see Parker Kligerman be as much of a factor in this race. Kligerman, of course, a past winner of the Truck Series race at Talladega, ended up finishing 27th in the unofficial results, 2 laps down. You get a little bit of a problem there where you don't come off pit road with enough drivers and you come off sequence. That could be enough to drop you out of the race. Again, we saw that with Keselowski, even among the leaders. Ended up spinning on pit road, and that cost enough time to drop him back out of that deal there. So let's look at everything else here. Yeah, 27 is a Tommy Baldwin entry? Okay, that's interesting. So Baldwin is the crew chief for the 27. I know that they had the 71 entered in earlier this year, but they still ran the 27 at Daytona. But then they said back then that the 27 was a Germain Racing entry, that it was a second car to Ty Dillon's effort. So this is the tricky thing with following a lot of these teams. There's a lot of overlap, and I think the umbrella of a lot of these is the premium motorsports part of it there, because they seem to have their hands in not only the 15 team and the 27 team, but then also Spire Motorsports 77 car, and perhaps that's been the workaround for a lot of these smaller efforts here, just running. Instead of having a new team start up, have them basically hosted out of the premium motorsports car effort and put new decals on another car and get them back out there. I'm not sure what the arrangement is with that, but they definitely seem to have their hands in a lot of these efforts out there to at least keep as many of these teams out here. But yeah, I'm not sure about the Baldwin tie-in with the 27. I mean, if Baldwin's the crew chief, he can certainly fill multiple roles besides just being a team owner. But yeah, that'll be something to look at going ahead. And I know there were some of you guys talking about the radio communications between Stanton Barrett and the Rick Ware Racing team during the race. I didn't listen to that much of it there. I know that there was some kind of communication with the spotter where they weren't sure about what was happening out there, but I didn't get the full context of that. Definitely 35th place finish unofficially for Stanton, his first Cup start since last fall at the Roval, where he was had some brake issues and ultimately drove into the turn one wall, the heartburn turn, and was the first car out of the race, finishing in the 35th spot. This time around, it says here 55 laps down in the number 52. But back out in the race there. Cody Ware finished under power. Looks like he was 4 laps down in the 28th spot. Speaking of the Rick Ware Racing team, Cody had his first race that he finished under power at Talladega last fall. Looks like he's added another one to that now. So solid finish for him. Just 2 spots behind Ross Chastain, who, as we mentioned earlier, had a good showing there and finishing in the 26th position. And so on from there. Let's take another look. Just taking a look through everyone's information here. We'll talk about the Xfinity race, of course, too, here in just a moment. I just want to kind of cover everything else from this. I hope you guys like the infographics on the website there. I've only done 2 so far, but I want to I created a template during the off week here to kind of work on producing those a little bit quicker. I was going to make another one this morning, we just ran a little short on time, but I want to kind of make some more materials like that, especially with the social media, to kind of spread word about the website and get a little bit more attention from some of the statistics here. That's the problem with this. Sometimes you get like some statistics that sound good, but then you got to it's hard to portray them in the best the most interesting way possible. I usually try to write them out, especially since Twitter now has like a longer character limit. It makes it a lot easier than it did in the 140 days. But this is going to be we'll probably do some more graphics here going forward. I'd like to do them each race at the very least, and then maybe tie in some other statistics as they come up. Unfortunate to see David Reagan 23rd in the finish here. He had a really good run going. Looks like he got collected in that wreck there with Larson and Jeffrey Earnhardt there at the end. A 23rd place finish for the 38 team. Unfortunate day all around for the Front Row Motorsports cars, which always seem to be a factor of the plate races here. Seems like whenever Reagan runs that Shriners Hospital paint scheme, he seems to do a little bit better than he usually does at the plate tracks, even though that wasn't the scheme that he ran when he won Talladega a few years ago. Let's take a look here. I mean, that's pretty much the long and short of it for the Cup race here. Good to see Daniel Suarez have a good run in the 41. I believe he had a good run in the 19 in the fall race a couple of years ago. But unfortunately ended up getting shaken out and back in the 12th spot. Really was working over the leaders there, trying to make something happen there, but the draft was just not working to his favor there. Even then, 12th place finish, continuing his strong start to the season, continuing to stay in the playoff standings there. That should be a good way to shore that up. And Ryan Newman in the 7th spot. Again, the 6 car has been just flying under the radar all this year, but he's doing significantly better, both that he had done in the 31 last year and that the 6 team had done with Bain and Kenseth and the other drivers filling that season out last year. Seems like that was a good combination for both driver and team. I'm really wondering from after that this race is wrapped up, which car was running looser between Ryan Blaney's number 12 and Ricky Stenhouse, the number 17. It seemed like both of them, especially when they got up to the lead, were really having trouble actually keeping control of their cars. But it's kind of amazing that neither of them actually triggered the big one. Although Blaney was, of course, the one in front of Bubba Wallace when that wreck happened at the beginning. But you can't really blame that on the 12 so much there. Let's see. But yeah, but we'll definitely talk about the Fox broadcast as well. I've seen a lot of comments on here for sure, and I know I was certainly noticing that too. A lot of the camera work is still leaving some to be desired. I thought it was, the look at the field there and actually trying to understand what was happening. I like that they had some distance shots. They used one towards the end of the race that I thought was really good. It was almost like a helicopter cam, not quite a blimp cam like that high, but a decent shot down the back straightaway. We could see the formation and different lines moving. I think that was really critical to understanding what was happening in this race in particular, because you had a lot of issues where where drivers were getting shuffled up to the outside line, and all of a sudden that was kind of the new sucker hole, if you will, where the drivers were falling back a bit. And then there was other parts where when the brief times that they would go 4 wide, Kyle Busch seemed to be making something happen on the second lane up from the bottom, and made a couple of really good moves there, which was interesting to see, because Kyle has really been struggling at Talladega in recent years. At least it seemed that way in terms of how long it's been since he's actually won at Talladega. He seemed to really have something going on that second lane there, and unfortunately couldn't make that happen at the end of the race there. But still a good showing for him. Let's see. Taking another look here. Still having the official results. No word yet again on the inspection queue. Let's take another look at the time here. We're about 37 minutes into the wait here. And as you can see, I got my number 23 Gray Galding shirt on here. I figured I'd bring this out after the events of yesterday's race, the Money Lion 300. Let's go ahead and jump right into that. First and foremost, as we have talked about in a lot of these shows this year, Gray Galding and the number 08, the SS Greenlight Racing Team, they have absolutely turned things around. And we talked about Ryan Newman being a good pairing with Roush Fenway this year. Galding and that number 08, they have absolutely made something happen over there. And Talladega, they were very impressive. Again, just like at Daytona, a great qualifying run there, started 8th in the race. Were very much a factor, at least in the top 20 for most of the race there. And at the end, just worked his way up there and had a good one-on-one race there against Tyler Reddick. Reddick just blocking like a son of a gun, like he's done in a lot of his races here. We think back to Las Vegas. We think back to some of his other starts this year. And with the 2 all battered up, still managed to hold off Galding, but Galding was absolutely making him work for it there. So really impressed with both the driver and the team, and have to congratulate him on that effort there. We'll see what happens at Daytona in July. Hopefully they can carry that over and put on another interesting show there for that team. But yes, as noted there, the 08, Bobby Dotter himself won a race back in 1992. And it's been that long since Dotter himself has won a race, and now him as a team owner for both the 08 and the 07. Just a great run for Galding there, and definitely got to give a shout out to him there. He was, of course, not the only underdog. That was a big story in there. Josh Williams getting his career best 8th place finish there for DGM Racing. This is a driver who just a few weeks ago had a sponsor fall through, wasn't in the 36 car back in Richmond, had to get in the 92, and the 92 missed the race, and Williams wasn't even in the show, and the 36 had to go to somebody else. So coming back, an increased backing there for the Startron and the Starbright sponsorship there. Had a beautiful new paint scheme for him. Williams worked his way back in there, got up to the top 10 at the end of the race, finishing in the 8th spot. So great run for him. Got to be happy with that. But that was going to be that was really interesting to see. I mean, really, really good to see for him there. Landon Castle in the 9th spot, almost not really considering him an underdog now, and he's really a Cup Series driver now. But an underdog in the Xfinity Series, finishing in the ninth spot. It's always good to see Johnny Davis's teams up there. But then behind him, Chris Cockrum and the Rick Ware team. Cockrum, when we last saw him at Daytona, was just doing a one-off there in the plate races, coming back to do his one-offs again at Talladega. We'd seen the 17 back out there. They've had some problems qualifying for races, but some reasonably solid finishes by Bailey Curry in the interim there. Kyle Weatherman had a few starts in that car. We're a little bit further back in the rankings there, but Curry did a really solid job in that car. And I'm sure that must have helped out the team preparing for Talladega, and Cockrum back in that car, getting a 10th place finish. I believe when I posted a message about that yesterday, his previous best was like a 21st. So a huge jump for him, actually getting a good finish out there. And I know that somebody was also talking about this the other day and saying that maybe, you know, the significance of these improved finishes for these Xfinity drivers isn't as remarkable because we have a lot of the Cup Series efforts that have scaled back this year, not having Roush, not having Ganassi. But at the same time, I mean, it's not, and yeah, the fields are shorter by 2 cars. So there's other things you can look at. But at the end of the day, they still got to beat who's showing up. There's still cars to pass. And I don't think that every other team that has come in that has replaced these guys has necessarily been worse. I mean, I see where they're coming from on that, but I think that it's still worthy of note. I mean, it's still an improvement in performance. I think that, you know, Cockrum's thing, for example, I mean, going from 21st to 10th, that's not just an improvement of maybe 1 or 2 cars. That's an improvement of, you know, a whole other 10 or 11 there. So that's definitely worthy of note. And Galding's thing in the same sense. We also talk about other underdogs in there. David Starr finishing in the 14th spot for Jimmy Means. The Means team, of course, having their best run with Joey Gase a few years ago, the number of 52, getting a top 5 finish. Means' first top 5 is both an owner or a driver. So that was good to see. Starr in the 14th spot there. Brennan Brown right behind him in the 15th spot. Looked like he had a top 10 going at one point there late in the race. Unfortunately, got shuffled out there, but still continues his streak of good finishes this year. And again, it's still, you know, it's still worth talking about. I mean, you look behind these teams here, and there's some big teams, some big name efforts that actually had some struggles that ended up finishing behind them. You got Michael Lynette, for example, being collected in a wreck. The Stewart-Haas racing car with Cole Custer. You're looking at Jeffrey Earnhardt and, you know, the Gibbs entry. You look at Jeremy Clements improving, you know, performance. Still had some problems there in an accident. Justin Allgaier eliminated an accident. There's a lot of teams that finished towards the bottom of the field there. These guys had to survive and had to stay on the lead lap to be a factor, and they were very much, you know, good at the finish there. So, you know, top 20 in the Xfinity Series has been interesting to see this year, and I think that, you know, the quality of the field seems to be improving, or at least to the level that these guys are actually becoming factors. And even though we see maybe at some of these shorter tracks that they still finish laps down, and other tracks like this, I mean, you go back down to 22nd and everybody's still in the lead lap. I mean, there's still factors in the race there. So, you know, again, a couple of different ways that they can look at it, but you know, that's the kind of deal there. But yeah, fantastic race in the Xfinity race yesterday between Tyler Reddick and Gray Galding at the finish. Christopher Bell trying to throw his hat into the ring there too, as he has so often this year excelled in that equipment. Perhaps not as much of a surprise in the Joe Gibbs equipment, but again, that kid is still on the very verge of preparing for a possible run at Cup, although we don't have anything confirmed on that, but I'm sure things are working behind the scenes to try to make that happen sooner rather than later. And we'd seen Tyler Reddick earlier this year when he ran the Daytona 500, got wrecked on pit road when the Rick Ware cars got tangled up during a last-second cut to pit road by some of the leaders when Reddick was drafted for 31. So he's already kind of positioning himself, but a good run for Reddick. Ryan Sieg, the RSS racing teams, it's unfortunate they weren't as much of a factor as we'd seen them in the previous ones. The engine problems for Jeff Green in the early laps after 52 laps. Transmission problems for Josh Bilicki, both of them rounding out in the bottom 5. And then some damage suffered by Ryan Sieg in the accidents there. Ended up finishing in the 16th position. There was an interesting discussion there. I retweeted it last night on my Twitter account from the sponsor Alabama Soda and Abrasive Blasting. See, I'm struggling saying it correctly too. And that was really the subject of the discussion. I retweeted it on there, that they were talking about frustrations that company had where they showed perhaps the listed sponsor for the 39 when the original entry was filed and not the sponsor instead. It showed, I believe it was Larry's Lemonade sponsorship for the number 39. And there was some frustration in there about the sponsorship's exposure because you print out like the actual results or the actual um, uh, published results by NASCAR and it shows the wrong sponsor or anything like that. That drew some interesting questions. Of course, you look at Racing Reference and it's a constantly updated site and they show the sponsor accurately on here. But it really goes to show kind of another thing that we've talked about in a lot of these broadcasts and everything about making sure that as many drivers and as many sponsors get as much exposure as possible because with these, otherwise, what are these brands paying for? I mean, I'm not saying that, there's always going to be something that's going to get missed when you have 38 cars out there. But at the same time, there's decisions you can make, like bringing the camera in or out at different points. You can do it through the field kind of format, like NBC used to do back in the day, that kind of talks about people further back in the field. You can kind of do features on different competitors there. You can do multiple screens. If you don't want to lose track of what's happening in the lead, then you can use another screen that's featuring somebody further back. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can work with this. And I know that a lot of you and myself have been concerned about the production of a lot of these NASCAR broadcasts and how that can be improved over time. But that's going to be definitely something to look at going forward. So, but again, this Alabama Soda Company, it looks like they've really, they're really jumping in with both feet. They were really, excited to back the RSS racing team. And again, why shouldn't they? I mean, that team has really been stepping it up, and I'm sure they're really doing a lot for their sponsors as well to kind of help them out. The other thing I was interested in was further back, Cody Ware finishing in the 21st spot, doing an unexpected doubleheader, driving for B.J. McLeod's team. That was originally going to be D.J. Kennington driving the car with the Lordco sponsorship on there, as he had run in the Daytona 500. But unfortunately, Kennington wasn't in the car by Saturday, and Ware was instead driving it. They took the Lordco sponsorships off the car, but it's still kind of the black and blue paint scheme that we saw run earlier this year. Ware actually had a solid finish, actually finishing in the 21st spot, just behind Max Tolman, who was making a one-off for Carl Long at the 20th spot there. But, a little bit of changes in the back of the field there. So you had some difference in some sponsors not getting exposure in that sense as well. So need to do more research into what's happened there at the back of the field. So Rick Holstein Sr. going to Dover this weekend. That's exciting. I think that should be that's one of those tracks that strikes me that maybe isn't very good on television, but I imagine it's really good in person. I mean, any of these races would be fantastic in person, but Dover is one I definitely want to check out one of these days. It's definitely, since it's a long-standing history in the sport. I think any track has a lot of history, and you could point to several significant things that happened, including, for example, J.D. McDuffie's only pole in 1978, and then Harry Gant, that was part of his 4-race win streak in 1991, and so many other things in between. I know they're doing their 50th anniversary celebration, much like Talladega is doing this weekend too, so it should be cool if they do some other promotional stuff tied in with that. I believe they're doing a ranking of like their top 50 moments. I remember they did a poll a while back. I don't know if they posted the full results yet, but they'll probably work on that this week. Let's see. We're going to have, I believe we're going to have some ARCA coverage on the website here as well. Again, big thanks to William Saki, our ARCA writer there on the page there. He's done a great job with that. Did a good feature on Brad Smith a couple weeks ago, or I believe last week during the off week. Getting that up there. So he's been doing some really good coverage there. And then we'll do that, and we'll get also some, we're going to get get an interesting entry list article this week coming up this Thursday. We're going to have a triple header at Dover there with the Truck Series, Xfinity, and Cup Series. Finally getting the trucks back on the track after a few weeks off here. So it'll be interesting to see how different that entry list looks. But yeah, I gotta say, really entertained by the Cup race today, and certainly the Xfinity race yesterday. That'll be interesting to see what happens. Just taking another look at everything here. I apologize if I sound kind of stuffed up. Allergy season is definitely kicked in here in Northern California, so I am on all kinds of antihistamines and trying to keep things cleared up. This was all a mess yesterday, so I'm glad that the disqualification show was today and not then. But so this is brought to you by Zyrtec and by Mucinex. That's our unofficial sponsors for today's show. But we're getting through it here. Let's take a look at our timer here as we continue to wait for results. We are about 50 minutes into our countdown here as we wait for inspection results from the Talladega Super Speedway. Chase Elliott, again, your unofficial winner, and Michael McDowell, your unofficial last place finisher. We've talked about everything else in the Xfinity race except our last place finisher, Joey Gase, again, one of the Carl Long-owned Motorsports Business Management Team cars. 35 ended up losing an engine after 35 laps and rounding out the bottom 5 there. An unfortunate situation for him, his first last place finish since Las Vegas, which was also known as Lastover, that weekend, where they had trouble getting a crewman from the hotel out to the track when they were having engine issues on the 66 that weekend. This being, that was kind of an interesting subject. I know that Carl had posted a message on his Facebook page earlier this week, kind of expressing his frustration over some of their organization. It looks like they were kind of shaking things up among their crew members and trying to make sure that they had people that were there, committed, and working on time and working as hard as he has to try to get that team going. I know they've bitten off a great deal by running multiple cars in the Xfinity Series, as well as trying to run a part-time Cup Series operation. That's difficult for any team out there, much less an organization like his that he's been working on for all these years. So hopefully we'll see an improvement in performance over time. Although Talladega is definitely a track where any deficiencies in an operation are going to be in some cases overcome. I mean, you could have a team come up there and just outlast other people and get a top 20 finish, but unfortunately for the Motorsports Business Management Team, best run out of their group being Max Tillman's 20th place finish. Further back, you had Chad Fincham and Joey Gase, the last two finishing cars in the race, in 36th and 37th. And then Timmy Hill collected an accident, finishing the 29th spot, in the number 66 car. So there was also word in there about, in Carl Long's post, about them running a second Cup car out of the Motorsports Business Management Team at Kansas. You recall Kansas is also the race that they returned to the Cup Series with Timmy Hill driving the green and yellow 66 car a couple of years ago. So it seems like Kansas is kind of their test track, if you will, for getting their operation up to speed. So I'll be looking forward to which car or which driver is going to be tagged in that. I know we'd heard originally going into Daytona this year that they were going to have Mark Thompson come back out there and run one of the cars, perhaps run the 66, and have Timmy Hill in the other car. Turned out that wasn't the case. So you had Joey Gase and his sponsors come on board, and they just ran the one car, the 166 car that ended up failing to qualify for the 500. But we'll see on there. I know I got a message from another user here that showed a possibility of a car number 53 at Dover. That's going to be interesting. What was that? I'm looking it on my phone here. See if I can find that. I think there was some debate about if that was going to be an entry. If there was skepticism if that was going to be the Motorsports Business Management entry, or if that was going to just turn out to be somebody else's. I'm not sure about that. Although they've run Dover before, including just last fall, where they had some issues there on the 66 team. So we'll see. Let's see. Dude, still checking out here. Did I save that on here? I think I saved it here. No, it's not on there. Okay, well, here. You don't need to be watching me look at my phone. Let me look at everything else here. So it's gonna be it's gonna be kind of an interesting couple of headlines for tonight's articles here. Joey Gase and Michael McDowell, definitely not the first time we've written about them this year. And that's always kind of the challenge in doing the last place articles. Of course, what do you do when you're writing about a driver that finishes last more than once? You kind of have to be a little creative there. And that's where the championship, I think, kind of plays a factor into it. We try to kind of actually have a continuing storyline throughout the year. I know that's kind of a polarizing subject there on the website, but I think it kind of helps with the narrative a little bit. It gives you kind of something else, because otherwise I don't want to have the article be really, really short and just say, oh, it was this guy again, because that kind of creates the same problems that the website was kind of based on there, where they're not getting as much coverage as much as before. So the context of that is something we kind of work on. All right. Let's see. Just looking at everybody else's comments on here as well. Let's see. Talking about the charter system on here. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly of a mind on that about, the way that that is all played out. I mean, there's something that needs to be changed on that and soon, because I don't think it's one of those things. I think it would be very eager for people that are big proponents of the charter system to just say, oh, well, that's done and that can't be undone, and we've moved past that. No, you get rid of that and you create an environment again where people can just jump into the Cup Series again. They'll come back. There's going to be other things that need to happen to help that happen. Of course, you got to lower costs. You got to make some more sponsors available instead of NASCAR grabbing them up. There's a lot of things that need to happen, but a good first start would be to get rid of the charter system and not create another artificial barrier where not only are they not getting a great and large enough piece of the purse that's going to actually help sustain their organization, but in some cases with some of these teams, they don't have to feel that they have to acquire or rent or buy a charter just to get back up there and actually compete again. That's always a really big problem with that, but hopefully that'll get reevaluated in the future. But who knows on there? Let's see. Oh, let's talk about the finish of that race too. Talking about rules and talking about the way that everything is set up here. Certainly, should there have been a caution for when Ricky Stenhouse Jr. hit the wall at the end of the race? I don't think so. Because it was we've seen this in the past before where somebody wrecks like the start-finish line. But in this case, it was much like Eric Jones's incident in the corners. He had pulled off the track, he pulled it out of the way, and they could just drive down there and finish it there. It would have been really hairy with I'm not ignoring, however, that there was a large piece of debris not far past the start-finish line there. You saw it on the camera there when Chase Elliott was driving by it. It seemed like there was still a little bit of an issue with that could have been a problem. Now, then again, they're all coming to the finish. They're slowing down. It just, they knock that out of the way, and so what? But, that's, there could be arguments on both sides of it. I'm still a proponent of racing to the finish line when it's the final lap of the race. I think that, I know it feels greedy to complain about anything about the actual on-track racing product because so much of it was so good, including the battle for the lead, the battle further back, and just the unpredictability of it. But I do think that still racing to the finish line, as different from freezing the field for caution in any other part of the race, seems to make the most sense. If you want to get emergency equipment on the track as quick as possible, well, they're driving race cars. Get them to the finish line and get the race over with and throw the flag the moment you can. You can even do something where you race to the finish line and then freeze the field once the leader crosses the stripe and then determine the finishing order from there. It'd be kind of pointless, because the line's right there and you'd like the line to be the thing that determines the finishing order. But if there's a compromise for safety, if there's an effort to kind of satisfy both sides, that might be helpful. But again, much like we saw, in some of these races in the past, it's the inconsistency. It's a problem. They need to set a firm line and just stick with it, because it's the inconsistent enforcement that's really just as dangerous, if not more so, I would say, than the very danger they're trying to prevent, which is another accident that's going to injure another driver. If they would just say that, once the white flag comes out, the flag that ends the race is the checkered flag. You've got to get to the stripe. That's the most important thing. I think that would be the easiest thing, because then these people out in the field, they're not going to back off. They're going to see an accident and immediately throttle back. I mean, you saw at the end of the race there was a little bit of a shuffle at the front of the field there where Chase Elliott had backed off, but Alex Bowman hadn't. And it looked like for a second that Bowman had taken the lead right before the caution came out. Of course, it turned out that wasn't the case. But you get that kind of situation that can happen. I believe there was a race in 2007 at Talladega where Tony Stewart was on the back straightaway and got hooked and wrecked on the back straightaway when everybody was slowing down. And he had some frustrations about that, understandably so. It took him out of a good finish there. But Those are the kind of things that kind of need to be looked at again to kind of fix all that back up. Let's see. Looking at other comments on here. Still not seeing anything about a biker racing or the NY racing team. No new news on that. Although, again, I'm still intrigued by what happened 2 weeks ago at Richmond with the Steakhouse Elite sponsorship with Rick Ware. It seems like, and for Yaley not to be driving for Ware with that sponsorship, it seemed like that sponsor had been tied pretty well with the driver, and that they had something worked out with the Jonathan Cohen there at the 7 team. But we'll see what goes on there. Let's take a look here. Yeah, definitely seeing a lot. Let's jump into this too. I mean, we've certainly through both the discussions we've had and a lot of these broadcasts, as well as the terrible broadcasts that we've done in recent weeks. I'm still kicking around some ideas on the third episode of that hopefully doesn't get taken down by NASCAR. Hang on. Let's not knock you out of the way here. There we go. The broadcast and the quality of it is still the overarching problem, and this race is a perfect example of it, because we saw a very competitive race, very exciting, a lot of close competition. But how much of it did we actually see? There's a lot of those tight camera angles coming off the corners where they bring things in and they try to actually show like a small detail on a car. In some cases, that's particularly helpful, as we saw with the incident with Matt Tifft at the beginning of the race today. Figuring out that actual pan that's underneath the front of the car, and it coming loose and it coming into the front of the car, and just understanding that aspect, that was interesting, and that was an important thing to do. But during the race itself, it's not particularly helpful, because we don't need to zoom. I mean, unless there's like actual damage they're trying to figure out, like maybe somebody pressed in a fender or anything like that, there's not really much point in having prolonged periods of just showing a couple of cars in the field. And of course, I personally like the leaderboard that's on the left-hand side of the screen that Fox does. I think that makes it very interesting to follow the actual running order and see people swapping positions and everything, versus a ticker that just kind of is distracting, just looks like the stock market results going by. But the one drawback with it, of course, is that it limits a lot of that lateral space there to fit it in. So if you're already zooming something in, then you're clipping off a little corner of it there. You're now seeing even less than what you had before. So it's, I don't know. There needs to be something that gets kind of worked out of there. Yeah, the graphic errors during the broadcast. I'm seeing your comment there, NASCAR fan 2041. Certainly some laughable examples there. The Ford that Alex Bowman was supposedly driving, graphics there. I still think the Charlotte studio thing is kind of unnecessary. I found that a little bit distracting during the broadcast, where they would talk. It's not as if they have enough people at the track already, that they already have 3 guys in the booth. You have the pit reporters, and you have all that. Now you have even more people in Charlotte, and you're going to start talking to them like they're in the room and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I mean, that's fine to a degree. I guess they're trying to make it like a football broadcast. So they talk to the rules analyst and have him call in, but then they have the whole other studio. And I think the studio setup is a little absurd. I don't like this whole thing. It looks like the Wizard of Oz, because they have this huge screen in the corner of what's happening in the broadcast, and that's also crimped and put over here. And then you have the 3 people that are talking. They're just standing there over here on the left side of the screen, and then there's a big empty space on the floor where they're standing. I mean, it's just not arranged very well. It's like, why not just have them just like on any of these other shows where you have a roundtable discussion, and they're sitting here, and there's a screen behind them showing what's happening. And just do that. I mean, they've done that before. I mean, just stick with that. And it's, I don't know. You mentioned the hot pass thing, Michael. I didn't try the hot pass thing personally myself. I think it was already kind of a sensory overload from what was happening in the broadcast. Yeah. And yeah, missing the 3 incidents during the commercial breaks. I mentioned this in the Twitter there. I'm surprised they didn't cut out of the accident that happened with Bubba Wallace. It seemed like it happened I believe they went to commercial at about lap 9 or lap 10. It could have been only a matter of seconds into the break when the accident happened. And we've seen in broadcasts going all the way back to 2001 in the Daytona 500, where a big accident would happen and they would cut out a commercial break to report on it. They, in fact, did that with the big Tony Stewart accident back then. It's not that they can't do that anymore. I'm sure the sponsors aren't happy when that happens, but gosh, they can weave that all in there. It seemed to me, at least, that I think a big reason that it was more obtrusive than it usually was okay. This is a broadcast on Fox. We've seen a lot of them on FS1 in recent weeks, and so they're just front loading a lot of these commercials in there. It seemed like the breaks were really long this time, more so than usual. I know it seems like an absurd thing to point out because it's been a problem for so long, but it seemed like they were a lot longer and long enough to the point that maybe if something is starting to happen and they go to commercial break, it ends up happening and then they come back, and it felt like a terrible broadcast kind of thing there, where you had they're cutting away and they come back. It's like, you're not going to miss a thing, and then they come back and it's like, well, you missed something. It's like, okay, yeah, I mean, really bizarre. I think a good way to approach a broadcast there is, again, it's something that would, again, satisfy showing as much of the field as possible and doing as full coverage of possible, is viewing a race as at the start of the race, all 38 or 40 starters, they have a chance of winning the race. And basically approaching this by saying this is an account of how one by one each of these drivers fell out of competition. So then you would want to follow this person as they went to the garage area, or this person struggles with this, or maybe this person spins out and then comes down to pit road. You want to account every one of those things, or somebody has a pit road issue. There's some of that, but it's not as comprehensive nowadays. I mean, for example, Landon Castle had a fuel pressure problem in the race today that ended up causing him to spin several laps behind the wall. That wasn't accounted at all. And then he came back out of the garage area with several laps down. That could have been something that they could have talked about at some point. And again, I'm not saying go chapter and verse into it, but at least have some mention of it. And I know what it sounds like I'm describing here is almost kind of a negative aspect of it, instead of describing people, because you want to talk about people going for the lead, of course. And of course, that's going to be a big part of it. But also further back, I mean, it's one by one, these competitors are falling out of the race, and maybe they just fall back and they're trying to come back from something. You could work something out with that. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but I think that would be something they could figure out. Yes, and Auto Rock and Racing 94, you bring up a good point too. And again, the hearing about Gary Lang passing away, I mean, that's tragic there. I mean, that style, and I'm glad they played that clip. That was a perfect example of it. That one old driver intro thing from 2001 where they show the different drivers and they had a little fun with the music and graphics and everything. Basically, those promos they would do, maybe sometimes going into a commercial break or kind of leading into a broadcast at the start. That was almost like the theme song or something for a show or something like that. I remember them using Streets with No Name from U2 for Sears Point, and having that fit really well in there. That's one that I always watch all the time there. And it's tragic to hear that he passed away, because that's a style that it definitely seems to be lacking these days. You see the difference between modern Fox and what Fox was about 2 decades ago when you just look at that. But I appreciate that they did show that in there, because that did show a nice, I think that was a nice send-off there to kind of show the quality of the work that he did. So a classy move by the broadcast there, but also showing really something that, again, looking to the past to kind of make that a lot better. And yeah, Beast of Metal 1989, you raise a good point. I mean, the camera work is perhaps these tight camera angles are being used so they don't show the grandstands. That the reason that they didn't have to do this back in the day was the grandstands were full and they didn't mind showing them. But now, they're having to do this, these closer angles that are just not they're just not showing that. I mean, the big problem I always had, I mean, I think a perfect example of that in the camera work is having the cameras that sit in the corners, the ones that are just sitting there and looking at the track, and then the cars zip by as it moves by. I mean, you can't discern anything that's happening from those cameras. I've been noticing that more and more in the last couple of years. I know we've talked about it on the show here before, but we saw this a lot during the duels, where they just kind of sat there and didn't say anything for a while because they're running single file. They would just have them go shoo, 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 and just cover them going through the corner and then doing it again, then doing it again, then doing it again, and just looking in in each corner and just see them go by, and then it becomes just cars going in circles. Whereas you don't see from the infield view, you see the strategy. You start seeing them pick different lines. You see them maybe break a little loose. You see small things that maybe you don't see from the stands. And that's the kind of thing that I think is kind of missing here. That it'd be nice to see come back. But yeah, who will have Darrell Waltrip's spot in 2020? I'm not sure. It's I have a tendency to think that maybe the people in the Charlotte booth that they're doing right now, maybe they're preening them to have one of them come up to the booth and just give them a try. I think they might do, if they don't have any firm person that's set, they'll probably do a guest analyst kind of position and maybe rotate that on a weekly basis. I can see them doing that just to see what works. Yeah, Craven would be a great pick. I mean, just bring him up there. I think that would be definitely worth something to try. Maybe they'll put McMurray in there. Maybe they'll put Bobby Labonte in there. Maybe they'll try something like that and just try different things. Okay, I've seen a lot of good comments on here. Yeah, Dylan Welch, Alan Bestwick. I mean, Bestwick, I don't see that happening unless, Mike Joy retires, and I don't see Mike doing that anytime soon. I think maybe a guest analyst position would be the thing. If I'm sure that they're looking at Harvick. I mean, that seems to be the one that everybody's talked about. But I don't see Harvick retiring either. I mean, again, very much like with everything else, he seems like he's really reaching the prime spot of his career right now. I know he didn't have a great run today, and he's still waiting to win this year. But we go into Dover next week. We know how good he is there. It's only a matter of time until he seems to scratch that first win of the season. But then again, we said this about Jimmy Johnson last year, and then he went winless. So who knows? But I would be very surprised if Harvick freed up that ride and went into the booth. I think he does a solid job in the Xfinity races, although not a spectacular job. But maybe that's what they need right now, is maybe something that's not so much of a distraction. They don't need a Darrell Waltrip, basically. They need somebody that's going to be a bit quieter or more measured in their tone to kind of balance things out. And maybe that'll bring Jeff Gordon into the forefront, and he can kind of stretch his legs a little bit more into what he wanted to do in the booth. Because I still think right now, I sensed that during the today. It felt like the three of them in the booth were like making jokes a lot of the time and kind of playing around. And like when Gordon was trying to do it, it kind of fell flat, which is surprising because this is a guy that's comfortable in front of the camera. This is a guy that is very aware and has been aware of his public image right from the beginning. It's not him necessarily. I don't think. I think Gordon can be a decent broadcaster, but there does seem to be like a little bit of a something not quite working in the chemistry right now. And maybe when Darrell is out and they put somebody else in, maybe that'll be the missing piece. But we'll see what happens on there. Stewart in the booth, that would be entertaining. I'm not sure what happens with that either, but I have not even sure. Let's see. Yeah, Lionel's going to make a lot of money from today. Yeah, certainly the Chase Elliott fans. I'm not sure how legion the Chase Elliott fans really are right now. I can't tell. It's of course. I mean, it was always surprising back in the day. I mean, thinking back in the 1990s, for example, just how popular Bill Elliott was. And yet, when you go to a racetrack, did you see a lot of people wearing Bill Elliott shirts? And we saw a number of them. But, I mean, I would say the majority would be wearing Dale Earnhardt or Rusty Wallace or Jeff Gordon. Like, that would pretty much be the big three. And I would think that if I didn't know any better, I would have guessed the most popular driver were one of those three because they were the ones that were selling the most merch, or at least seemed to be. I'm not sure if Chase Elliott's in that same position right now. It kind of seems like he is, but I'm not sure entirely offhand. I know NASCAR would like it to be that way. It seems like he's being promoted as the face of the sport and the exciting young gun. And they do the little graphic where they show the Avengers Endgame rendition of all these different drivers standing around the race graphic, and Chase is like the biggest face on there. And is he the biggest one in the group? I don't know, but yeah. But in terms of the broadcast, it's it'll be interesting. Let's take another look here. Oh, let's see. I think we're coming up on 1 hour into the wait here for the inspection results. Oh no, we're past it. Wow, goodness, it's gone by quick. An hour and 15 minutes into the wait for inspection results. We're going to take another look here at social media angle here. Taking a look here. Boom. Okay, I'm seeing a posted Talladega results page about 18 minutes ago. Jeffrey Earnhardt and William Byron were released from the infield care center. That was posted 24 minutes ago. Let's see. Everybody counting the number of times that Kyle Larson rolled down the back straightaway. Goodness me. Here, let me post this tweet here. Somebody from the backstretch there got a pretty good shot of Kyle Larson's accident. I'll copy this and put it in the thread here. You guys probably have already been seeing it here. Let's see. While we continue to wait here for the results, we're not seeing anything official from the inspection results quite yet. First of all, I want to give another big thanks to our Patreon members right now. We're up to 5 patrons right now, and we had a very generous donation from our latest member here. And I hope the person doesn't mind me mentioning their username on here, Blaze Zebratar on there. A huge thanks to you for joining up there on the Patreon, joining in the group there. So again, we're just and actually from that donation, we've now actually I'm debating about making this mention, but I'm going to go ahead and do that because it's going to be coming up. Because we've reached our first goal from our latest patron member. The first goal indicated that we were going to make another BSGN starting grid video sometime this year. That goal has now been reached. So I'm pleased to announce in this video here that there is going to be another starting grid at some race this season. We're still having the patrons vote on what race that is going to be. So we're going to have more information on that when it comes up. But then that's going to be once that gets voted on and once that's official, I'll give a heads up to everyone there so they can expect that. But yes, after we did the Daytona 500 starting grid back in February, there is going to be a second starting grid video this year. Have not yet decided on the race. It looks like it may be in the next couple of months. It's kind of looking at, but we'll have more information on that as we get sooner. So again, big thank you to Blaze Zebratar and our other patrons who joined on there. We've reached our first goal on that, and we'll do some more work on that going forward. Always good to get another chance to do the starting grids out there. Unfortunately, I'd like to do them on a weekly basis, but that's just not possible with a lot of the other demands at the moment here. But we'll see what things look like there. But I'm glad to at least be able to do a second one here this year for you viewers, and that'll be here on the YouTube the channel here in the near future. Looking at the comment, NASCAR fan 2041, do you think we'll ever see a network take over the whole season? And if so, which network do you think could best take that role? I think we may see a network take over the whole season, but only if the season gets a lot shorter. I'm not sure if a single network would really be willing to take on a sport that begins in February and ends in November, or at least not one that does events every week. I think that's a big burden in terms of sponsorship and costs and everything to take on. Now, if they're willing to cut costs and do a simpler broadcast and kind of get rid of some of this extraneous stuff in there, maybe that would be possible without a shorter schedule. I think that's what it's going to take. I think quite honestly, and again, don't worry, there's not going to be any endgame spoilers in here for those of you who haven't seen it. Definitely go see it if you haven't. But if I had any kind of role in deciding how these broadcasts are set up, I would want to have that glove and snap my fingers, because I would want half of what's in there to just be gone. I would get rid of half of everything. I really would. I I would get rid of like half of the different camera angles. I would get rid of half of the pre-race shows. I would get rid of half of this and half of that, and just make it lean and mean, and just focusing on the race, and just having all the other stuff just pushed to the side, and just do that. That's what I would do, and that would be the way to do it. I think that would be a great starting point. And maybe if something else got added to it later on, that could come up organically. It's like, well, maybe we shouldn't have got rid of that. Maybe we can build that back up again. I think that would be better. Because there's just too much. I mean, we talk about like other things like, a live stream or something like that in there, and all this. But I do think that there is a lot of that going on. So I think that would be a great place to start, and just prune things down. And it's unfortunate because there is a lot of talent that's there, and maybe a lot of that talent could be working with another network or anything. That if you still had a 36 race schedule over all those months, finding some place to make that work. But I would really appreciate something closer to an older ESPN broadcast, and where they show as much of the field as possible and the racing takes center stage. And okay, yeah, they're going to have gimmicks and things like that along the way, but they have their time and place. I think the only thing that really wouldn't work from all those old broadcasts, and I don't know if it feels as irritating now as watching it in a retro aspect, is when they would do like a segment during the race itself and have it go for like 5 or 6 minutes of just not showing the race. I don't think that would fly today. So at least today's broadcasts don't do that. But what they do instead is the commercials and all the in-game commercial broadcast stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the broadcasts. You cut down the costs, and you cut down the contract costs and everything like that. You're going to have fewer commercials, and you're going to have fewer stuff around there and all that, and just less stuff. Like Fox came in, and Fox in particular, and I'm not saying NBC's not guilty of this, because there's part of that too. Fox came in as being like the fresh new face, and something where they put even more effort in than ESPN had, and really trying to singularly make this their own, and put all this in there with like what they have now today, with like a drone camera and the gopher cam and all this other stuff there. They're doing all these different things, and they got excited. They did all this other stuff, and it was great. I mean, there were a few years there, I'd say from about 2001 to 2005, those were like the glory years there. They really did a great job, and they did a good job with like season-long narratives, and they had a good handoff with NBC, and you still had some figures from the old broadcast that were still involved in it. You still had Benny Parsons in the NBC group. You still had, you still had Bill Weber with Turner Group there after being a pit reporter for ESPN. You had all that, but it seems like the other moments later on that that just didn't work out. But it's yeah, and again, that's the difference. I think that would be something that would be much more enjoyable. I think something like that where the racing takes center stage, and because it doesn't need a whole lot of help. I mean, it doesn't need a whole lot of this other stuff going around it. And I think it's an issue of the ends justifying the means here, that we have an expensive contract and a lot of production that's involved in the sport, and that's justifying having to sell all this commercial space and all this other stuff. And it's just this never-ending treadmill that's going faster and faster, and you got to throw more and more money at it to keep it going. They have control over that. They can pare that down if they wanted to. And again, I don't want to be flippant about people's jobs or people's careers or anything like that, but it's still, I think that there's such a thing as too much. There really is, and it could be like this in any other thing. I mean, think if you have like if you're doing, what's a good example? Like if you're doing like a theater production or something like that, and I don't know much about theater, but I mean, like, I'm thinking, like, I'm imagining if you have like a couple actors on the stage, but then like now all of a sudden you have like 15 or 20 actors on the stage, and they're all doing this, they're all doing that, and there's all this stuff happening in the background, and they're putting, the stage isn't just a stage, it's gonna be like 5 times bigger, stuff like that. It's not necessary. If you have a good story, if you have a good way of portraying this as a narrative, if you have a good broadcast that just gets across what's happening and leaves everything else to the side, I think people will really enjoy that, and they'll be engaged with it, and they'll want to know what's happening from one week to the next. I mean, nowadays with when you're going against Netflix, when you're going against Hulu, when you're going against serialized programming, and you need to kind of create your the sports in a way that can be presented that way. I think that's the way that it's going to survive in the way that media is being consumed these days. It's like, okay, this is the next episode of the series. The series is the Monster Energy Cup series, and we want to know what happens from one week to the next. And it's not scripted, but it's still serialized and something in a way that can do that. And that's what I feel. I think the old ESPN broadcasts were ahead of the curve in that sense, because I think they understood that. And cable television was new, and it had a lot of freedom in there. But I think they understood that the championship is the storyline, and they want to have what happens throughout the entire year is relevant to that. That we're building all this year. And it was asked earlier, and actually this goes back to the question that was asked earlier. Do you think we're going to have one network take over the whole season? Maybe the alternative would be that you would have a season like ESPN where they maybe jump in like the fourth or fifth race of the year, and they cover a number of races through the season, including like maybe the last 2 or 3 for the championship, and that's their season, instead of them just only dealing with the first half of the year, and the other network only deals with the second half of the year. I mean, it was bizarre back then. Newer fans, I'm not sure if you remember it as much, but to think that, okay, is this an ESPN race, or is this a TNN race, or is this a TBS race, or is this an ABC race, or all the channel flipping you had to do back then to keep on top of it, just to watch the entire season. I think it would be really interesting to, like, say you had this race today, and then NBC covered Dover next week, and then ESPN covered the All-Star race or something. I mean, that would be really interesting. I don't know how well it'd be able to be maintained or anything like that, but I think that would make it even more important than ever to have a season-long narrative and actually keep track of what's happening in the races and how each race plays into the season. I think there's too much of the take it and throw it away aspect with the races these days. It's like, okay, this stuff happened. Okay, that was last week. Okay, this stuff happened. Okay, that was last week. But there's not a reference back to, okay, this is what happened a couple races ago, or this is something that's going to lead into next week, or something like that. It doesn't feel like that's in there as much. But I think when you had that much uncertainty and that much chaos, really, with all these different networks involved in it, it required them to maintain a season-long narrative, that they had to literally carry the baton from what one network would do to the next. And maybe that's why the broadcasts are portrayed the way that they are now, is that they don't have to do that. And so, they're able to either, I don't know if relax is the right word, but they're able to do it in a way that maybe isn't as there's certain steps they don't have to take, because we know that they were there. And so they know what happened, and maybe they don't have to tell us what happened. They say, well, you remember what happened then. We don't have to go over that again. This is what's happening now. That would be interesting. Well, yeah, unless it's drivers carrying grudges, and then it's every 5 seconds. NBC seems particularly guilty of that too. And I get that they have the championship run. So, of course, if there's going to be something like the Kenseth and Logano thing, or, Logano versus Truex or something like that, they're going to ramp that up constantly. So that's going to get remembered. But, yeah, I mean, I still think, and we talk about going back to talk about the efficiency of broadcasts. And this was brought up by another user on Twitter before the race started today. Whether you like the crew members, the broadcasters talking to drivers during the race, during the pace laps, or if you want a starting grid that actually breaks down what's happening. Again, the narrative efficiency of a broadcast should start with the starting grid. I think a starting grid is, you go through the entire field. You could say along the way, this is the guy that won last week, or this is the guy that's the points leader, or this guy is the all-time leader in wins at Talladega. There's so many things you could say about everybody, and everybody go all the way down the field. Mention Stanton Barrett. Mention that he's never had a Cup start at Talladega, and that his previous start was at the Roval last fall, and that he's teamed up with Rick Ware like he was back then. You don't have to go that far in depth, but you have a selection of things to say about everybody, and go through the field. And so there's nobody that's ever really, ever really forgotten in that aspect. We talked a couple weeks ago in Richmond about the Joey Gay Sam Bass car and how it didn't get mentioned at all by the broadcast until about 17 laps to go. It was absurd. But it finally did. It finally got mentioned. But that could have been something in the beginning because what a starting grid does, you're watching the broadcast and you'll look out for things. You can engage in the broadcast much in the same way you can on social media. You're told about all these competitors, and you're told about who they are and what they're competing for, and what their goals are or anything like that. And then you can look out for that. Excuse me. We are now at the 1.5 hour mark. We are now in a holding pattern at any time for results from inspection. So we are now at the 90-minute mark. But again, just to round this off before we take another look here at inspection results, that's the important thing. I think some kind of a theme song or some kind of an intro, much like what was done by the gentleman that passed away, by Gary Lang, something like that, going into a starting grid, and then just rolling the cars off the track, and then everybody in the audience can say, "Ooh, they told me about this guy in the starting grid. I'm going to be looking for him in the race. And look, he's up there. This is his first start today, like Justin Haley." You can engage in it. I think that's what people respond to. You can get that on social media, but you need to get that in the broadcast too. And I think that's what's going to keep the broadcast relevant, is adjusting to kind of the serialized nature of entertainment and creating a narrative that encourages a week-to-week viewing. I think that's been lost a little bit, which is unfortunate. It's just like, okay, this is happening, but just wait till next week. That's going to be something else. But let's talk about what's happening now. But yeah, if that makes sense. Let's take another look here. Let's see. Oh, I was getting, I got to see your retweet here, Michael Harvey, posting the quote from Kelly Crandall here. Brendan Gaughan being quoted, "I just told the boys, I don't know what y'all think is so tough about this. I show up once every 3 months and just drive into the top 10. This stuff's easy." Quoted for Brendan Gaughan there, getting in the top 10. Let's see. What am I looking here? Okay, I'm now looking again. I'm seeing your comment here, Benjamin, on the 45th and below. Any chance these teams might attempt a race this year? I don't know why they're listed. Let's take a look here. Ooh, this is the stuff I like. This is the stuff I like. Interesting. Okay. So I am looking at a screen cap here. I'm going to post this in the chat, and we'll talk about this as well. I believe we should have, I have a post on Pockrass here too in the meantime. Kyle Larson flips, especially, okay. No official word, at least on Pockrass's page on the inspection. But let me get this comment on here. On down. Let's make sure that's the right tweet. That's the one that it's giving me here. This is interesting. Okay, so there's 51 teams listed on the official owner points list here. I haven't looked at this here, but I just got this posted here. So again, thank you, Benjamin, for sharing this on here. So looking at a different number of teams here, looking at SCST Motorsports and the number 54. This is Cup Series? Yeah, this is Cup Series points. Nemco Motorsports bringing the 87 back. GMS Racing, Spencer Gallagher's former team, the Gallagher Motorsports team, bringing the 84 car out. The NY Racing team and Obaika are both shown on here. We haven't seen them this year. It's a team called Venture Motorsports, driving the number 79 car. And Circle Sport back on the list in the 33. Now, we'd heard the Circle Sport had, I believe, leased their charter they had before with the 95 team. I guess that lease ran up, but they're still listed as a separate entry on here. These are a lot of teams that I'm not hearing much about. And what I'm not seeing on here is the 53 car that was shown in that tweet a while back. Let me try to see if I can find that again, because I don't, maybe it's possible that was Xfinity and not Cup, but that's probably why I'm not seeing it here. Somebody shared that with me, and I want to make sure I give the right credit. Okay, that wasn't him. We'll take another look on here. For those of you just joining in, we're still waiting for inspection results from Talladega. Unofficially, Michael McDowell still your last place finisher, and Chase Elliott still your race winner. We are now looking at some other results of some possible new teams that are going to be entering later this year. I know we'd seen this in the Truck Series going into Daytona, where they had some numbers listed. I believe the second Riam Brothers Racing truck was entered listed at Daytona, and then later entered at Eldora later that year. Let me see. But yeah, very interesting post on here. Given how we've had so many short fields, especially like record short fields in recent weeks, um, it's pleasing to see that they're getting some other teams trying to get back up there. Was this on here? Not seeing here. Taking another look. I think it was on my main page here. I apologize. You're seeing me look at my phone here again, but live television, everyone. Let's see. No, not that. Not that. Not that. Not that. I don't spend too much more time on this. Okay, not that. We talked about this too. That was the interesting thing that was posted by another user on here too. I didn't see the official Xfinity results from Saturday's race. It didn't show Josh Bilicki originally in the bottom 5 there. It just showed Knoll on the racing reference page, but that later got filled in. The RSS racing team getting a bizarre treatment there. I'm not seeing it on here. But I know there was a 53 team that was entered earlier, and I'm not seeing that on this particular list. I'll have to look at the Xfinity results to see if it shows up there. But what do you guys think on that? Maybe some other runs here. Let's see. Like supposed to be Naruto. How long has it been for this? Seeing Custer being the 53 or somebody else with him in the 52. Don't even know if it'd be running a cup races. Ventures Racing was the only 66 team in 2014 with MWR. Well, that was Identity Ventures Motorsports. I remember that because that was the one that Tommy Dreese drove for at Sears Point. But this one here, I hope the tweet's showing up okay on here. I just copied the link that was on the page here. It shows just Venture Motorsports. And it shows number 79. It shows 179. So I guess somebody else had the 79 already. And then Obico with the 97 and Circle Sport with the 33. Yeah, that's an interesting one. This is the first time seeing this. I hadn't noticed that from looking at the owners' points before. It's interesting. It'd be interesting to know the process when people register different owner points numbers and everything, and how they pull up. Let me look here. Points reports. Looking at the owner points list. Let me pull it up myself here on here. Yeah. Okay. And just to put this in a frame of reference here, the 44th place points team is still Tony Baldwin's team, the number 71, and it shows. Okay, and this also sheds some light on the other teams that we're seeing here this year. It does show a 27 and a 127 for the number 27 team there. So both of these are basically the same team. They're both the Premium Motorsports cars, the number 27, the Rim Riders sponsorship, the team that we saw Reed Sorensen drive for today. In one star, it shows the 1 point earned for Casey Mears when he crashed in the Daytona 500, 43rd in points as the 127. But then the 27, the original entry, goes back to Premium Motorsports. So apparently Premium got the rights to the 27 first, and that's the team that's been running since then on a part-time basis. So we've had 44 teams in all attempt to race so far this year, the latest being the addition of XCI Racing, which is now currently ranked 40th. The 45th on back, these are all teams that have not been entered in anything yet, but I suppose were registered at the beginning of this year. And it lays out some very interesting questions for these 7 teams. Dover is a potential track that maybe we could see some of these in there. I mean, just complete guess. I mean, if we're typically, you'd like to think you would see them at plate races there, actually filling out the schedule. But yeah, anything can happen. We've seen. We talked about Kansas with the MBM Motorsports team before when they brought the 66 back out. Dover has a long history of having some very bizarre teams come out just for some occasional starts. I know not on the bizarre end. J.D. McDuffie was called several times back in his day to call to fill out fields. You think of names like Freddie Crawford and other guys drove for Hilton's team. The last start for Chrysler, Maurice Randall driving 1985 at Dover. that's what makes me, kind of encouraged to go out there and see a race out there just to get the flavor of that. Um, it's going to make me very interested in the entry list this week if we get some or all of these teams out there. Pocono has kind of taken that mantle too of having interesting teams that we don't really see compete in the Cup Series that often or on a part-time basis. So yeah, Carl Long's running a second Cup car for Kansas. Yeah, I've heard that report as well, but I don't see it on this list here. I don't see a second. It should be under Motorsports Business Management, which the 66 is. And this was what I was told from Brian Kieslowski working on the 66 team last year, is that Mark Thompson had his own points that he entered the Daytona 500 with last year. I believe it was last year, or the year before, driving the number 66 car then. And that those were the points. Yeah, it was last year, because last year Timmy Hill had to fall back on those points for the sealed engine rule after they had the problems at Martinsville and then were unable to qualify at Texas. But I'm not seeing that here. I'm not seeing a second team that specifically says Motorsports Business Management. It's possible that one of these cars is just happens to be that, and maybe it's like a Mark Thompson arrangement that's being entered by another driver, but it's sharing the shop with the 66. This is where it gets really unclear. This will be hopefully a story we can follow up more as we get closer to those dates. But the 7 and 97, the only mystery is just why they're not at the track. But these other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are here, raises some questions. I know we'd heard about GMS Racing attempting the Cup Series because they were in position to bid on the BK Racing assets there when the team closed in August. And then, of course, Spencer Gallagher making his Cup debut in Watkins Glen last year with the number 23. As to if this is the same arrangement, they're going to run the 84. Is that going to be something with John Hunter Nemechek? Is that going to be something with Spencer Gallagher or something else? We'd heard that Gallagher was retiring from NASCAR, and I'd spoken to him in Phoenix last fall. They said they had some big stuff planned. He wouldn't go into details about that. Is this a part of that? Not sure, but again, this is some breaking news on here for me too. So we'll figure it all out together. That's very exciting. So again, thank you to Benjamin for bringing that up here. And to James Honeycutt II for originally posting that as an excerpt from the results here. So again, thank you to you both on that one. Let's see. Let's check Pockrass's page here again. I'm still not seeing any results here. It's a plate race. I know we did the Daytona show. We had to kind of cut off before we actually had a call for the inspection results. This looks like it could be a longer one again, much like we had that weekend there. But I'm not seeing anything here at the moment. Let's see. So, excellent. So, family emergency for the 7 team. Oh, I think that, yeah. Was it you that mentioned that earlier, Matt DiBenedetto fan? I should be better at saying that. That mentioned the family emergency. I think maybe we did talk about that earlier. So that would be hopefully that gets worked out earlier. And then the Opelika team, not hearing absolutely anything. I'd had contact with their PR person last fall, but if they didn't even have a hauler ready for Daytona or anything like that, that would be interesting. Yes, and that's right. Starcom Racing originally was going to enter at Dover, and then they got pushed back to Kansas, and they ran the second Kansas, so that's true. I wonder why that is. Kansas is. You would think that if you're starting a new team, and all these teams are based in Charlotte now the Furniture Row is closed, you would think that they would have Charlotte be their start, or just a track that's closest by. Do the Roval. I mean, maybe something like that. I mean, I know they've only had one of those, so we don't really have any precedent for that, but that would be interesting. Gosh. What else we got here? Let's see. Looking here, I kind of like the paint scheme on Stanton Barrett's car. It really stood out with the red car with the yellow numbers. I know it's a little bit of a different arrangement with the different drivers there. It would have been interesting to see what Bailey Curry could do there too. That's got to be the unfortunate thing when you're a part-timer in the Cup Series. and you're with a team that usually changes drivers and teams out all the time. When you get to the restrictor plate races and you go into it and you think, oh, well, I'm going to get into this race and I can maybe get a good finish, maybe I can outlast other people. Then they put some other guy in there that's like your plate expert or, your plate driver or something like that. And then you got to go back and run these downforce tracks and these short tracks and just ended up finishing 10 laps down. That's got to be disheartening, but who knows there. Hey there, Creed King. Welcome aboard to the chat here. Good to see we have 10 people in the chat here. That's a very good showing for tonight. Hopefully everybody excited about the race here, and good to see everybody excited about the race. Up to 11 now. Very good. Excellent. Thank you again, everyone, for joining in here. We're just talking about the weekend in racing. We just finished talking about the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, as well as the quality of the broadcast, and now some new news about some possible new teams entering the Cup Series later this year, leaked by, or perhaps leaked, if you can call it that, from the official owners' points. We have about 5 teams that we haven't seen them even appear at any tracks this year, plus the 2 teams, the Avica team, which we haven't seen since their announcement in January, and then Jonathan Cohen's team there, which apparently is dealing with some situations off track before they return to action. Dover, as I've mentioned here, is possibly a race that we could see some of these teams come back. Any of them could certainly. I mean, that's all speculation there, but I would say even more realistically, perhaps Pocono would be one where we would see somebody turn up, or New Hampshire. We've seen New Hampshire, the Go Fast Racing team in particular, running some local modified drivers in those cars there before. Now they have a full-time driver with Corey LaJoie, so perhaps they won't do that unless they enter a second car. But an interesting set of circumstances. SCST Motorsports, Nemco Motorsports, so obviously Joe Nemechek's team, bringing the 87 back. GMS Racing, so Spencer Gallagher, the Maury Gallagher's team. I keep saying Spencer, but Maury Gallagher's team, looking to make at least some starts from the Xfinity Series to Cup. Venture Motorsports running the 79. Now the 79 used to be Go Green Racing's number. Used to be, if I remember correctly, or they ran the 39. There was another one that's 79. I think it was. Gosh, I got to look that up. That was Kelly Byers. I wrote an article about him before. New Hampshire. Let's look that up, and we'll figure that out together. There's the number 79 car. Yeah, the best way car. Unfortunately, this is back when I wrote really short articles back in 2012, but I at least have some pictures there. Let me go ahead and share the article in there. Articles for today's race are coming together too. We got an outline for both of them, so hopefully it won't be too late tonight, but they will be later tonight. Ooh, there's a good point there, Auto Rocket. I mean, if you have Nemco and GMS on there, possibly something with Joe and John Hunter racing together in Cup. That would be interesting. That's certainly a possibility. Hadn't thought of that at all. 79 car from 2012, and I'll put that old article in there so you can see that. I think that was Archie St. Hilaire's team. Let me look up the results, and because I want to make sure I'm quoting that correctly. I know they ran the 39 in Xfinity because Joey Gase used to drive for them, and then the Cup Series they ran the 79 because the 39 by then was Stuart Haas, so they had to pick a different number, which is probably why they had the number change. Let's take a look. I'm pretty sure that's an Archie St. Hilaire car. Yes, Best Way Disposal. There it is. Yeah, finished 42nd in that race. Jay Robinson's car finished last, but he finished back when he was teamed with the Blankety guy. They had the America Israel Racing entry there, finishing 43rd in that race. Yeah, it was an interesting time with a lot of these teams out there. But yeah, okay. So 79. So maybe that's a possibility of a second. That would be my guess with that. I mean, again, just a guess. We're all speculating together on this one. We're all trying to figure this out. I would think the 79 is maybe a second Go Green race, Go Fast Racing car. Maybe kind of going back to their roots there. I mean, the only other context I've seen the 79 is when Jimmy Means fielded a second Xfinity car in recent years. But Means doesn't have a Cup car this year, unless that's changing. And there is another 52 out there. I mean, Rick Ware's running it, so but I don't think they would do that under the Jimmy Beans banner. They wouldn't have another name for it. Yeah, Venture Motorsports. Gosh. And Circle Sport, I think Circle Sport is just a placeholder on there because the other charter. Of course, I was about to say the other charter's out there, but it isn't. I mean, they pretty much have all been grabbed up. You got the 36 teams. Maybe not. They're not ranked in the first 36. Well, no, they should be ranked in the first 36 spots. Let me see here. Does it have the number of attempts? Okay, there's the number of attempts. Okay. So yeah, 10 for Spire. That's interesting. You look at this here. You have the 2 attempts for there's 36 teams that have attempted all 10 races this year. But at just 2 attempts, Brendan Gaughan's team has passed up the number 52 team. It is now up to 37th in points. And the other one that's the outlier that's jumped up there is the Gaunt brothers. In just 5 attempts, they're ahead of Spire Motorsports, number 77, that's attempted all 10 races. So again, just goes to show the magnitude of Justin Haley's run. I know I'm hearing reports about there being some technical alliance with the Childress team, Chevy Engines, but a good arrangement that they had there. So, but yeah, further back, SCST, wasn't that, well, I guess it wasn't NXT Motorsports that we saw in the Xfinity Series, because Gaulding drove for them at Daytona in the Xfinity Series, and then that didn't go through. And I thought they ran the 54. That might be a different thing, though. I don't know why they would just jump to Cup, though. We haven't seen them in Xfinity either. Love a good mystery when it comes to this here. Oh, we're seeing, we got results here on the, I'm seeing your post here, Anthony. We got a result from the technical inspection. Okay. Yep, there it is, 4 minutes ago. Okay. So we do have a call, everyone. Tech is done. Chase Elliott is your winner. Daniel Hemrick's car to research and development. So Chase Elliott is your winner. Michael McDowell is your last place finisher. At least no disqualifications from the winner. This being called 4 minutes ago, just past the 1.5 hour mark. Actually, we're pretty well into this now. Okay, no, hour 36. So we're just a little bit past that here. So yeah, almost 2 hours this time. So that'll be interesting. So, yeah, Circle Sport partner with the 32. I think they would be. That charter must be up there somewhere because they have to still have 36 teams, and I don't believe Circle Sports lost theirs yet. They're still leasing theirs around. But it still makes me wonder why they're on there, why they're still there as a separate entry, unless they're planning on starting it from scratch again. But I mean, we'll see if Joe Falk gets back out there and does that. I mean, that's gonna be interesting. Well, we're going to do some more research on that in the meantime here and try to find out what's happening here at the back of the field. But there's certainly some interesting teams that could be coming back in here. That's a good catch there, everyone. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up for right now so we can get the articles finished here and get you guys back up there. But yes, Beast of Metal 1989 to answer your question. So yeah, this is Michael McDowell's 33rd last place finish, and that is worth mentioning again. Let's make sure we mention that. Michael McDowell now has 33 last place finishes, which ties Joe Nemechek for the most in Cup Series history. And big thanks to, I believe it was DNF Racers for helping point that out. I'd forgotten that coming into this. Yes, tied for the most last place finishes in Cup Series history. Joe Nemechek's held sole possession of that record since 2014. So more than 5 years later, that record is now tied. McDowell now has the most last place finishes of any Cup Series driver in 2019. That's now 3 already in the first 10 rounds. So an unfortunate start for him after a promising start with the 5th place finish in the Daytona 500. Accident not of his own doing, just gets collected. Actually happened when he was running towards the front. Clearly had a fast car out there, at least for the start. But he will be your feature for tonight in the Cup Series article. And Joey Gase, your last place finisher for the Xfinity Series. So thank you again for tuning in, everyone. Long show for tonight, but I appreciate you guys hanging in there. We're going to be interested to see what happens with the back of the field and possibly some new entries coming in at Dover. Whatever happens on that, you're going to find out in our article this Thursday here as we do an entry list preview every week, as well as look out for William Saki's article from the ARCA race in Talladega. And thank you again, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for Dover, the Monster Mile, the triple header, the Truck Series coming back into action. Should be very exciting. But a very exciting race today in Talladega. Very exciting races this weekend, and lots to be excited about going ahead here, both on the Cup and the Xfinity Series side. A big improvement from what we saw in Daytona. And yeah, maybe they're on to something with these 9-inch spoilers and wicker bills and the air ducts. They finally bolted on enough things to these cars that they're going to be something interesting going forward. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you in Dover.